We started 9 years ago with a small group of World War II veterans gathered in the suburbs of Pittsburgh. We were there simply to listen, and with a little coaxing, we got them to share some stories that they hadn't even told their families. Today, we hold over 60 storytelling events at dozens of locations throughout Western Pennsylvania. Thousands of people have come out to hear these voices from history.
But they aren't just voices from history, they're young voices too, of those who have served since September 11, 2001. More Americans need to hear these voices, and we think the best way to thank a vet and welcome them home is to listen and get to know their stories. Our evening events create these communities of listening around our post 9/11 veterans. The events are all open to the public and everyone is welcome.
Over 5,000 different people have attended our events, but we've only begun to meet the need. Over 235,000 veterans live in Western Pennsylvania, 12 million nationwide. We want to reach all these veterans in all these communities by expanding beyond Pittsburgh to new cities and new regions.
One way we're expanding our reach is through our digital media. Our weekly podcast, Longest War, explores today's military in all its diversity and examines what life is like back home for our young veterans.
We're always looking for new veterans to attend our events, as well as new listeners and new sponsors and new partners and new platforms and venues for sharing our veterans' stories.
We believe every veteran has a story.
So come check us out and get involved.
Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Helping Hands. What we do on this show is try to help organizations and groups get their message out and see what we can do to maybe help get a better understanding of what the groups are about and what they're doing. And today, I'm very pleased to have Todd with us from Veterans Breakfast Club. And Todd, why don't you introduce yourself, fill everyone in a little bit about the organization, where it's come from, and yourself too, and how you got involved.
Thank you for having me on, Jack. My name is Todd DiPastino, and I'm the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club. And we are a nonprofit 501c3 that creates communities of listening around veterans and their stories. And what that means is we bring veterans together with members of the public, and we have the veterans share stories at these storytelling events. And we do 60 to 65 of them a year, 30 different locations around Western Pennsylvania, and you never know what you're going to hear. Fred Garrow here, this is his first breakfast. You told me how old you were when you joined the Army.
16.
They let you in?
No, I lied about my age. Well, everybody was in, so that was the thing to do.
And where did you grow up?
Fayette County.
And you just took off one day? Did you tell your parents? How did that work?
No, I just went down the draft board, lied about my age, and 7 days later I got inducted.
And so you went overseas, and what was that trip like?
Well, you grew old fast then. Self-preservation was the biggest thing. You gotta take care of yourself and you'll survive. We were noted as a good attack division, but we spent most of our time with General Patton.
And so were you in the Battle of the Bulge?
We went in late and supported them. Then we went on to Czechoslovakia from there.
So you ended up spending 23 years in the Army?
Well, I didn't want to go back and dig no more coal. What the hell, I got $51 a month. If I got $51 in the coal mine, I didn't get it. I was lucky, like my dad said, you nice fella, here's a 5 cents, so you go get a chewing gum. No. And then he said I was lazy anyway.
I'm beginning to see why you joined the Army at age 16.
Yeah. There was no justice in home justice. He was a dictator, and what he said went. That was it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and enjoy being
Good. The oldest veteran to share a story was 103 years old, and the youngest veteran was 23. And you have everything in between. We have mostly morning events, but a lot of evening events. Sometimes we have lunchtime events. So, any time where we can get a diverse group of veterans sharing stories, that's what we do. And last year we had about 6,000 people attend our events. And they're all open to the public. Anybody could come. They're a marvel. They are an education. They're an inspiration. And I think there's a lot of healing that goes on when veterans, especially those who have suffered the trauma of combat, veterans share that experience.
Day one, when we arrived in Iraq, we took incoming, and
Day one.
We were just picking up our linens, and 4 or 5 rockets hit our base, and unfortunately 2 of the soldiers in the next unit over perished in that rocket attack. So,
What was it like tending to these young souls of 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds who are so much? You could be their father.
yeah.
I guess there was like an avuncular relationship, almost a parent relationship.
It was, and it was, with all the sergeants and all the military people, really keeping them disciplined and ready for, combat at every time. They needed somebody they can come to and just,
Yeah.
unwind. I was just telling my table here that I had a lot of people, grown, burly men, crying in my office almost on a daily basis. But yeah, it was an incredible experience to support our soldiers, to support those men and women who were risking their lives.
What started this?
It started in 2008. A friend of mine, Dan Kavanaugh, had been a bus captain on the World War II memorial bus trips down to Washington, D.C. And he came back and said that the magic of the trip was not seeing the memorial. It was listening to the stories on the bus on the way down.
Really?
That the veterans were talking to each other. And in talking to each other, they were sharing their stories. And he very diligently kind of went through the bus, collected their contact information, got them together, and then invited me to one of these gatherings that was held at Fort Couch Road and Crown Plaza. And there were 30 World War II veterans. And what we did, I'm a historian, so I teach and write, and I gave a lot of talks. But instead of me talking or anybody else talking to them, we gave them the microphone and moved it from person to person and tried to recreate what had happened on the bus. And it worked. It's like that environment, you get a critical mass of veterans together. There's a brotherhood and a sisterhood that happens. And it's almost this magical alchemy where you have a critical mass of all this experience in the military, and they begin to compare and contrast their stories, and they crack open and they start telling these stories. Often they hadn't even told their families.
That's what I've heard.
And that's really what got us to continue it. Is we got them together again. This time around 60 people came. So they were the veterans with their spouses and children and grandchildren in some cases. And a spouse was coming out and she said to me, "This is really great. I've never heard any of these stories."
Wow.
And my jaw dropped because, this is somebody who had been living with these stories for, at that time, 60, 65 years, and he had never shared it with his wife. And we just knew that whatever we were doing, we have to keep doing it, and we have to encourage more vets to come because we loved it, the families loved it, and the veterans enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can imagine, that'd be hard to hold that information in, as dramatic as it must be also, to have experienced it.
It is, I'm not a veteran. And so for me, working with these vets over the past 11 years has been just a continual revelation. And I don't know if I'll ever really understand the dynamic that takes place when a veteran comes back from a life-changing experience and just doesn't share it with anybody, holds it in for years, and then decides to share it. And when they decide to share it, they share it so beautifully and vividly and movingly and with such emotion. It's hard for me to understand the dynamic that takes place within the veteran, but I feel very grateful because I think these stories are gifts for us.
Yeah.
Because we're inspired by them. Yeah. I've had Vietnam vets, and this is just one of many examples, say, I've never had a bad day since Vietnam. And that's really great for me to hear because I'm, a whiner and complainer like everybody else is.
Right.
But being around the vets, it really has given me a sense of gratitude and perspective and wisdom. Don't sweat the small stuff and be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for every breath you get to take because all of them, no matter where they served, when they served, they're all very aware that when they put on that uniform, they were writing this blank check that could be cashed at any moment, and they could be called to serve in a dangerous situation. And they all knew people who didn't come back, and they're all grateful that they're here. And that's what they all have in common. And a little bit of that wisdom, and a little bit of that gratitude, I think rubs off on those people like me who are there as, outsiders to this brotherhood and sisterhood.
Right. Now, does this transfer? Are you seeing people maybe from high school attending some of these breakfasts who are considering enlisting or maybe have, or parents of?
Great.
I mean, what happens?
Great question. Yes, we do. We really encourage kids to come to our events. And for example, we have an event in Beaver County every other month, and we usually get a 60 or 70 sixth graders come from Dutch Ridge Elementary School.
Really?
They're wonderful. Yes, we get AP students from Canon Mac come to our South Hills breakfast. We get college students come. A good number of those are people who are considering maybe enlisting. And I remember being at an event, and I think it was an evening event, and I think it might have been at Spoonwood Brewing, which we have evening events there in Bethel Park. There was a young man there and a young woman there who were both considering joining the service, the Marines, I think. And we heard some tough stories that night, tough stories of combat. And I left thinking, oh, those kids, they were scared away.
Yeah.
Both of them said, I'm joining up for sure.
Really?
Yeah. And I said,
That's
really,
what I was wondering
after
if it
what
would
you've
intimidate.
heard.
Yeah.
And, how you interpret the stories, whether they're good or bad, whether it makes you more anti-war or, understanding war better, that's kind of up to the individual. But the stories touch and move everybody in the room.
Bob, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dick.
Korean War veteran, were you an 0311 Marine?
Yes,
You were 17 when you joined the Marine Corps.
right.
What made you decide to join the Marines at 17?
My brother had been in the Marines, and he was a sergeant. He'd come home like on a Thursday and wouldn't go back until the following Tuesday, every other week. And he had a new car, and he had money in his pocket, and he had a lot of girlfriends. Now, what's a young 17-year-old
What else could
guy
you possibly want, right?
what else is there? Well, it didn't work out that way for me.
So you were joining in peacetime, basically.
Right. And they sent me up to 8th and I in D.C., so it turned out to be a post, the oldest post in the Marine Corps, and that's where they had the silent drill team. I got involved in that, and I was there 2 years. We guarded the president when he went to Camp David, or Shangri-La it was called then.
2 years of that, and then you volunteered to go to Korea.
Yeah, so they put up a list on the bulletin board in our barracks, and they asked for 10 volunteers. I was one of the first to sign up. So when I get there, they said, we're going to make this landing. We're going to go on LSTs from Japan to make the landing at Incheon. So when we get on the LST, we see stacks of 2x4s. We said, what are we going to do, build houses? And it turns out we were going to build ladders. We were building ladders to climb up a seawall, and nobody had ever done that before. But next stop is Seoul. We're leading the attack in Seoul. We're one squad on each side. The machine gun squad follows the rifle squad. And they had machine guns up in the trestle, and they opened fire on us going up, and they cut down like the first 5 or 6 guys on each side of the street.
So let's talk about Chosin.
So we're on our way to Chosin, and we're out there in the middle of this plateau, And we get surrounded. It's easy to surround us because, we can't cover all that territory, especially in the winter. And then the Army gets hit on the 25th of November, 1950. The 8th Army is in route retreat, biggest retreat in military history. And they left us up there, and we're getting surrounded, and they don't even tell us. Ullman didn't even tell us to cut off the attack. They hit us with 150,000 men against 15,000 Marines. Now, any other battle, if you have those kind of odds, you're going to lose. The Marines are special. There's something about them that if the chips are down, boy, you want the Marines on your side. They could be your worst enemy or your best friend. And I believe that.
So it's safe to say you don't regret it?
No. That was the greatest 4-year adventure I ever had.
Now, you have a schedule of events that's kind of profound. When I looked, there are a lot of events.
A lot of events, yes. We started out in Bethel Park in the South Hills, and that was the only one. It was a part-time kind of volunteer effort for a couple years. Okay. And we kept on getting requests to hold them in Penn Hills and in North Hills and at Moon Township. And so then we tried. We held one in Penn Hills and got 160 people there.
160 people?
Absolutely. And so we kept on having them there. And, same with each of our locations. We have more requests for events than we can fill at this point. We eventually were able to, get sponsorships and donations and grants to support the work we do. And in 2016, we got some big grants from the Jefferson Regional Foundation, which really helped us to expand what we do and get paid and hire, staff. And that allowed us to expand to the point where we can do 60 or 65 events a year. Wow. And a lot of other things. We have a podcast and, we have media. Nice. We record the events. And so our mission really is to get these stories out to the public. And one way to do that is at our live events. Okay. Another way to do that is to get the stories out digitally on social media platforms and on our website. Okay. So we're pretty diligent about recording our events and making sure those stories get edited,
good for you,
packaged, and put out so people could hear them, because it's our history. They're not just any stories. These are men and women who served for us in our name. Right. We called them to serve. And so although the stories are the individual property of the person, there's a sense that we all have a stake in these stories. This is our history that we're it's their stories, but it's our history. Right. And we're learning as we listen.
Right. Okay. What can people listening do to help get involved or help share with the organization or help, if you want, build the organization? Or what would you say as an appeal to, if you want to get involved or you want to help, here's what we would like?
Step one, come to an event. Okay. Come to an event. They're all open to the public. There are no restrictions whatsoever. You don't have to be a veteran to attend. Come and see what they're all about, because we're called the Veterans Breakfast Club, but it's more than just breakfast, and it's more than just veterans, and it's not really a club. There's no membership, there's no dues or anything like that. You just kind of come and listen. Come and listen. Listeners are really important to what we do. If there were no listeners, there would be no tellers.
I get it.
So we need people there like me who are the listeners. And so come to an event. Our schedule is at vbcpgh.org, vbcpgh.org. And you can see our schedule of events. We have morning events, we have evening events, we have special events. And so that's a good first step. If you know a veteran who might enjoy getting together with his brothers or sisters or her brothers or sisters, let them know. Let them know about us and what we do. Send them our way. Certainly, if you know of a company that might want to sponsor an event, we're always looking for sponsors, and we're always very grateful for people and companies that sponsor our events. You can listen online. Follow us on our Facebook page. That's where we release every Wednesday. We release a 2-minute story video taken from a breakfast. Frank was on the USS Utah on December 7th, 1941. So what was your job on the USS Utah?
Engineer.
And what do you remember of that morning, December 7th, 1941?
The night before, I had the duty taking sailors to Honolulu and picking them up and bringing them back to the ship. So I was able to sleep in that morning and have a light breakfast. So the planes were coming over, and the officer at the deck with a pistol, it was shooting
at them with a pistol.
Yeah. Right after that, everybody went to their battle station. And then a few minutes after that, the officer at the deck says everybody up except the watchstanders. So that's where I was able to get out of the engine room. The ship got hit with a torpedo, and the ship was landing on the port side, and I was getting off at the starboard side. That's where I jumped off and swam to Ford Island. And while I was running to Ford Island, the planes were real low.
The planes were low and shooting at you as you were swimming.
Going toward the nurses' station in Ford Island. The nurses' station gave me dry clothes, and they put me on a ship.
Wow. And, and Frank just saw so much war. You went over the Atlantic and then to Europe. How did you respond to coming back home when the war was over? I mean, I can't imagine after all those years.
I was going to sign up over again.
Were you? Really? You like the Navy?
Yeah, my mother stopped me.
Oh, my God. You had a good mother, Frank.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you for sharing your story. Wow.
Now, do you have people that volunteer and help put these together?
Gosh,
or they
yeah.
all, you do?
Oh, yeah. We rely so heavily on such committed volunteers. I mean, once we started these events, I mean, the volunteers just, boom. Not all of them veterans, some of them veterans.
Yeah.
One of our, I've got to say, veterans are great volunteers. Veterans are committed to service. Mm-hmm. And one of the greatest volunteers I've ever seen in my life is on our board. He's a retired Lieutenant Air Force Colonel, also retired Episcopal priest, Ben Wright. And he is tireless. He is truly the model of servant leadership. I mean, he'll do anything. He'll clean up afterwards. He'll set up. He doesn't want to be thanked. He doesn't want the limelight. Yeah. I don't know what we'd do without him. But there are many more Ben Wrights who come and help at our events. We need we really need a team of 4 hardworking people to pull off one of our events, and we get them every time.
Okay, you do.
Yeah,
yeah. How did you? I came across your organization by seeing one of your flyers. I can't remember where, and it was the first time I ever heard of the organization. Yeah. So, how do you get the word out for all of these events and how do you get the people to come?
Great question. We do almost no marketing. I mean, this is our newsletter. We send this out to about 6,000 households. Okay. And then we print another 6,000 just to distribute. And no doubt this is what you picked up somewhere.
It is.
And then I ask at every event, I say, hey, I've got thousands of newsletters stacked in my garage. My wife wants them out of there. Please take as many as you can and distribute. And people do.
They do.
The veterans will take 100, 200 at a time, and they'll take them to their gun club, their VFW, their Legion, their retirement community, their library, their doctor's office. We have somebody who distributes them at the various VA clinics and centers in the area. Mm-hmm. This is our marketing. We really don't do any other marketing. We're largely apart from social media, word of mouth. Okay. So somebody will come and say, "Wow, these events are amazing. I've got to, tell my buddy who loves these kind of stories," and they'll bring the buddy there. And I've got to say that our most common format is the breakfast format. Okay. And the breakfast begins at 8:30 in the morning. In the South Hills, we've always had them on Tuesdays for some reason. That's just what we've done. Except a few times we'll have it on a Saturday just to get people who work for a living to our events. But the breakfast starts at 8:30. The program then starts at 9.
Okay.
And I welcome everybody and introduce our sponsors, and then I go around with a wireless microphone from 9 till 10:30.
Okay.
And I'll just say, Jack, you were in the Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
or your father served in Alaska.
Yeah.
Did he ever talk about that?
Right.
And the vet will stand up and you'll get a story, and then we move to the next one. Like I said, you never quite know what you're going to hear. There's always, every event, there are a few tears.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There's always a poignant story.
Yeah.
But every event, there's always a lot of laughter.
Really?
Yes, a lot of laughter. A lot of it laughter about combat situations. A lot of it just laughter about, the absurd situations you get yourself in a regimented system like the Army.
Mm-hmm.
The military is a distinct and separate subculture with its own rules, its own values and principles, its own language, jargon. And so often, when a civilian like me is at one of these events, you're kind of getting access to the subculture, how it works. And it's funny to translate it into civilian terms. So there's always a lot of laughter. and I have to say, I think people leave our events, when we have to bring it to an end, always more stories left in the room than we could cover in 90 minutes. I'd like to begin by asking if you remember December 7th, 1941.
I do. I remember it very well. I was on my way to a girlfriend's house. It was her birthday, and I heard it on the radio that we had been bombed at Pearl Harbor, and I had never even heard of Pearl Harbor. I read in the paper one day that the Navy was looking for women and for college graduates, and you could walk right in with a commission. You didn't have to go to boot camp or whatever they called it then. So I applied and got in, and that was that.
So you went right from Northampton to Washington, D.C., and immediately started working on Enigma?
Yeah,
Okay.
we were sitting in I guess it's a replacement place in a gorgeous little chapel there. And somebody came in and said, "Did anybody speak German?" Well, I didn't speak it, but I had a couple of years of it in high school. So I raised my hand and they shot me off to the German section immediately. That was it. And I learned to do the decode work on the job. The messages would come in from all over the North Sea, Bay of Biscay, all along the French coast. There were receiving towers. And by radio, all of the German messages were sent out over the air. Everybody did something. Everybody wanted to do something. Everybody wanted to do something big. I'm sure that women would have fought in the trenches if they could have. Everybody was ready to go. It was a great time, a great patriotic era.
I think everybody leaves feeling really good, feeling like they got something really important.
Yeah. And you actually have some of the people in the room who might have had a parent that served, and they're telling a story about somebody else.
Yes, because sadly, older veterans, especially veterans of World War II, are passing, and so we have children who grew up in households that were very much impacted by their fathers, usually World War II service, and it's a delight to have them share what they know of that story. We still do have quite a few World War II veterans who come to our events, especially in Bethel Park. We get at least 15 to 20 World War II veterans at every one of our events in Bethel Park. I had reason to go through our database and write letters to every World War II veteran we had, because we want to honor them this year for the 75th anniversary of 1944, the year of D-Day, the year of Battle of the Bulge, important battles in the Pacific. And I sent out 120 letters to 120 World War II veterans who have come to our events, in the past year or so. And it surprised me that we had that many still
that's
around,
a lot.
which is a lot, and they're treasures, and we treat them as a treasure. And our last breakfast in Bethel Park, we had two 101-year-old veterans.
That's unbelievable.
It is. Jim Ross, who served in the 8th Air Force, lives in Dormont, came to our Bethel Park breakfast. He'll turn 102 in November. And Joe Zimbicki from Bridgeville
No kidding.
just turned 101 last week, and he told a story about being wounded in Normandy after landing on D-Day +2
Really?
with the 90th Infantry Division. Yeah.
Joe, you are 100 years old, correct?
Yeah, right.
You landed on Utah Beach,
Utah Beach.
2 days after the D-Day landings,
Right.
correct?
Right.
So D-Day +2. What was your first experience of combat? What was the first time people were shooting at you?
We got on a farm between a valley. Germans were on the other side, and Joe was on this side. I says, well, I'll dig a foxhole for myself. So I started digging the foxhole, and I got hit with a machine gun bullet.
So that was like, how long after you landed on the beach did you get hit with a machine gun bullet?
That was probably about a week or so.
A week,
Yeah.
only a week.
Yeah.
So you'd only been in combat a week, and it hit you in the
Right.
in the shoulder.
Right shoulder. It didn't go through me because I was bent over when I was digging the hole. It went underneath and out.
How long were you given? I mean, we were so short of fighting men by August after D-Day that they were taking guys who weren't fully healed up yet and putting them back in.
Yeah, in other words, before you get finished in a replacement pool, they take you back.
And that's
When
what
you're
happened to you.
attracted. Yeah.
You got put back in.
No, they put me in the MPs then. I was living like a king.
So after you were wounded a second time, I think with a little piece of shrapnel in your head, right?
Right.
And that was it. After that second time you were wounded, they gave you this great job of being an MP, guarding General Patton's plane.
Right. Hey, living like a king, I told you.
You living like a king.
Right.
I mean, General Patton is considered a great general, but he wasn't like the nicest guy in the world, right?
Well, I don't know. I think they built him up too much.
Okay.
Because when you saluted him and you get on an airplane with him, it's just like he was with a regular soldier.
As long as you were spit and polished and perfectly clean and you saluted him,
Right.
he left you alone.
Right.
You never talked to him or anything like that, right?
No, he didn't get a chance.
No
Yeah,
way.
in other words, he stays away from me.
The farther away from you, the better.
Right, sure.
Tell me, I'll ask you what I asked Jim. Do you remember coming back home?
Coming back home, yeah, because I was in the MPs then, say, and then that was a different story.
I think you told me you came in through New York Harbor
Right,
and you saw the Statue of Liberty.
right.
What did that feel like?
I saluted this Statue of Liberty.
You saluted it.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my. Thank you, Joe Zimbicki, for coming out today. 100 years old.
I see on the signs, on the telephone poles, all the pictures
Yes.
of past serving veterans, and I just am awed by that. I've always been.
It is.
You see those too.
Driving here.
Yeah.
Driving here. I'm driving through Bethel Park to get to the studio to meet you.
Right.
And I pass these banners, and some of them I know, some of them I
do
don't
you?
know.
Wow.
Some of them I knew well, and they're now past, and that makes me sad.
Yeah.
You know, Bullet Bob Daly is up there, was on my drive there. You know, Dick Gardner we just lost. His banner was up there on Route 88. And then there are ones I don't know, and I think I've got to send them a newsletter. I mean, the real part of the marketing that we did and we have done for years is kind of guerrilla marketing, where I'll see somebody in the grocery store and they'll be wearing a Marine jacket or something like that, and I'll hand them one of these.
Or a hat. I see a lot of
a
hats.
hat.
Still.
I'll
Yeah.
go in the parking lot and put it under the windshield wiper, and my daughters, when they were little, they would say, like, do you have to stop every veteran, you see? But that was, every veteran has a story. That's our slogan.
I'm sure of that.
And it's absolutely true. And the other thing I should say is the vast majority of the stories told at our events are not combat stories. It's not all blood and guts. Most people who serve in the military don't serve in a combat position. They're either serve in technical capacity or another kind of leadership capacity or maybe administrative work.
Oh, that's interesting.
And those stories are absolutely, I think, just as moving and powerful. It's amazing how often we get somebody who will stand up and say, I joined the Air Force, in 1970 because I wanted to go to college. And I was an administrative person and served at these bases for 4 years. And then she'll break down and cry a little bit and said it was the most important work I've ever done in my life.
Really?
And it's just, we hear that time and time again. I think to those of us who haven't served, it's very hard for us to understand the impact that military service has on the rest of your life. We have one wonderful Vietnam veteran who served in the 1st Infantry Division, Ron Worstel, and he says something like, I'm 70 some years old. I was in the Army 2 years, not even 2 years, and it's a tiny percentage of my life, but it's 75% of who I am.
No kidding.
And I think that he put it for a lot of other vets. I think that's how a lot of other vets see it.
What about, I have to ask you, a lot of the vets who have returned, but they've come back compromised, or they've come back handicapped, or what happens there? And do you get involved with that, or do you see volunteers coming to you who want to help, or do they come to the meetings? Tell me about the ones that aren't as healthy as others.
That's a wonderful question, because we're very aware, and have been for a long time, that we see a self-selected group of veterans. We see veterans who, for the most part, have a very positive relationship with their service. They view their service positively. They've adjusted well back into the civilian world, and they come to our events for the kind of the fellowship that they get, and they want to hear the stories. We're very aware that there are veterans who are not like that, who did not reintegrate well, who came back so severely damaged that it was an obstacle to kind of getting their life back on track. And we've talked as an organization for a long time about how to reach this group, and we try certainly through word of mouth. But I think what we ended up deciding is that there are a lot of other organizations that do reach those who need care and help. And so we view our events as a way not only to share stories, but also to have veteran service organizations and other nonprofits who serve veterans come to our events, let people know about the services that are out there.
Oh, that's good.
A wonderful organization. We have the VA Vet Center that does veterans counseling. We have Soldier On that does deals with housing crises with veterans. We work with Veterans Leadership Program, and just about every veterans organization, the DAV, every veterans organization around. And we encourage them to kind of let people know that they're there, that these services are available, and to contact them if they know a veteran, if they run across a veteran. And it does happen all the time. Somebody from Corporate America Supports You, which will be Casey, which is another one of these wonderful veteran service organizations that connects veterans to jobs and to employers. You'll see, they'll talk about the service that they offer, and you'll see people at our breakfast kind of writing down the information and then talking to her afterwards. And that's, I think our organization provides our people with a network so that they could access services and resources that they're entitled to and that are available to them or to people they know.
And do you see that happening at some of your meetings?
Yes.
At your breakfast?
I think it's an important part of our mission. It's become an important part of our mission. It's, we feel like we're not equipped to answer all the questions that people may have or to, fill that need that people may have. But what we can do is connect them to the people who do have the answers.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, state representatives, U.S. congressmen and offices, they'll come to our events and also, offer, let people know what their offices can offer.
That's very, very nice to hear.
Very important.
So if somebody wants to come to an event, they can come onto the website. Is there a cost for the event when they come?
Great question. It varies. Generally, at our breakfast, if you want to eat breakfast, it's $12. If you don't want to eat, there's no charge. And usually about 15 to 20% of the people who attend do not eat. So they're there simply to enjoy the program, and that's absolutely fine. The $12 covers our food and facilities cost, and But then we have a lot of events that are free of charge. We just had one the other night at the Heinz History Center. We will, we'll have a few coming up. Our evening events generally are no charge. So we have one at Spoonwood Brewing coming up on May 21st. And that'll be another one of our storytelling events, but it'll be free food, and there'll be a cash bar and no charge.
That's very nice.
So, so it really does vary. You want to look at our schedule and see what works for you.
And do you do any other type of events at any time in the year that are different than the breakfast?
Yeah, we do. We do panel discussions. We did a screening last Friday night. We did a screening at the Heinz History Center of We Were Soldiers, which was a Mel Gibson movie directed by Randall Wallace, came out in 2002, and it told the story of one battalion in the Ia Drang Valley, which was the first major battle between U.S. forces and North Vietnamese forces in the Vietnam War in November 1965. And we screened that, the Heinz History Center screened that movie, and what we did is one of our veterans, Dennis Deal, was a platoon leader in that battle. That was his first combat experience.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had Dennis come and talk for 45 minutes about that battle and about his experience and about what people are going to see on the screen. I mean, Hal Moore was his commander.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Mel Gibson character was his commander. He knew all the other characters in the movie, and he was an advisor on the movie. Wow. And it was, it was jaw-dropping to hear, again, that voice from history. So we'll do panel discussions. We did one last year that was a little edgy for us. We keep politics out of our events, but we decided to hold a panel last year on should we bring back the draft?
Okay.
That was, it's an issue that we hear that bubbles up at our events. And we decided, let's just have a panel discussion. We had four people, 3 veterans, 1 non-veteran, and every opinion was represented. We had a
well, that's good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You heard.
Yeah.
I felt we heard the very best of each argument.
That's
each side, and we had a lot of questions and commentary afterwards. So every once in a while we will do a panel discussion. We had a very, very popular panel discussion on women serving in the military. We had 4 or 5 female veterans tell their stories last December.
What made you decide, I want to be a part of the Women's Army Corps?
Well, I'll tell you this story. You had to be 21. I wanted to get out on my own, and my mother, Dad, no, you can't go. You can't get your own apartment. So I saw that as a way to go in to get away from Mommy. And believe me, I'm not the only one that said that. 2 years ago, a 14-year-old great-granddaughter told me, said, no, that's not the way you went in. You went in to get out, that you could do it on your own. I was a telephone operator, and always with a male group. In Fort Custer, Michigan, that's where the boys came into the service. Then after 15 months there, when I went to England, that was the first base post office where all the mail from the United States came in and had to be redistributed. And unfortunately, it was also where casualties came back, and that's where one of our girls learned that her brother had been killed. Then, just 6 months before the end of the war, they sent me to Vitry-sur-Seine, which is right outside of Paris. There again, still working with the post office, but needless to say, on VE Day, and in case people don't know, that's Victory in Europe Day, I was there for the big celebration in Paris. A lot went on, parades and all kinds of celebration. I was in a pub in England. Our young soldier came up to me, taps me on the shoulder and says, "You're from Meadville, aren't you?"
How did he know?
He lived next door to a friend of mine. You know how girls go back and forth to their houses. Not only that, his brother and I were in the same class. And he knew me. I'll be honest, I wasn't sure who he was.
So we will do kind of special events like that where we really focus on one experience. Coming up for the 75th anniversary of D-Day, the first week of June, we'll do several events where we have D-Day veterans talk about that important event. So yeah, most of our events are kind of free-form storytelling. Some of them are a little bit more focused.
We're fortunate you're doing this while veterans are still here and can share those stories that will be lost forever at some point.
Now's the time.
So we're very fortunate about
Now's the
that.
time. And you know, and that's the other thing I guess I'm always preaching is now is the time to ask. I mean, if you have a veteran in your family, if you have a father or a brother or an uncle or a grandfather or grandmother, now's the time to start asking them about their service. You know, none of us know how long we're going to be around and how much of an opportunity we'll have to share our stories.
Right.
And I think simply asking and showing that you're interested in the answer is often just enough to get the veteran to talk a little bit. You know,
which I think most of us are and have not known there was a platform that we could actually go and hear more about.
Yes.
That anybody was willing to talk about it, actually.
Well, and many of us have, you know, parents who served or grandparents who served, and the common theme I hear from family members is they've never talked about it.
Right.
I don't know anything about their service. So I would ask, like, it's not always easy, but find a moment where you could ask the question, I'd like to hear more about your service in Vietnam. Dad.
Are there any events you do or trips or anything like that? You get vets together and maybe go somewhere?
Yes. We used to do a lot of trips, and we curtailed it a little bit because we wanted to expand our storytelling events. But last year, we decided to bring our trips back with a doozy. We realized that 2018 was the 50th anniversary of 1968, which was the year of the Tet Offensive, a real turning point in American history. And we decided to kind of commemorate that year with a trip to Vietnam.
Wow.
And we traveled. We did a Veterans Breakfast Club trip to Vietnam, 2 weeks, starting in Hanoi, going down all the way down the Mekong Delta. And we had 17 travelers with us. 7 of them were Vietnam veterans. It was a thrill beyond compare for me. I mean, somebody who has taught, I taught at Penn State Beaver for many years and at Waynesburg University, a course on the Vietnam War. And to be in Vietnam, all those places that I taught about, to be at Khe Sanh, where one of the most iconic battles of the Marine Corps was fought in early 1968, to be up there in that jungle, rainforest, plateau, which was remarkably small, to be there with 2 Marines who fought there in 1968, and to have them say, this is where my hooch was. This is where the mortars came in. That's where the ammo dump was hit and blew up. I mean, this is where the airfield was. I mean, it just, it was beyond compare to be there with them for when they encountered, just like we did, the enemy.
Right.
We were at the DMZ, and one of our Vietnam Marines, Andy Niggett, he's a real hero. He came back extremely disfigured from his wounds that he experienced in 1968, and there we are in this little museum at the DMZ, the 17th parallel, which had separated North Vietnam from South Vietnam. And older Vietnamese man came up to Andy and said, "War?" Like this was his face, and Andy said, "Yeah, I was wounded in war."
Wow.
And the Vietnamese man said, "Me too." And he pulled up his leg, and he had a mangled leg, and he said, "NVA." And the 2 men, who's the enemy? And our Marine, Andy, just, his eyes got wide. And they just embraced, and the Vietnamese man just broke down crying.
Really?
And it was just such a beautiful moment. You realize these are just 2 warriors. And Andy has said to me since, and said to our group since, that, they were just like us in many ways. They were warriors like we were, fighting for their country, and that's how they...
Today, our guest is Andy Niggett, who is I would say former Marine, but there's no such thing, right? Once Marine, always a Marine.
That's correct.
And you come from a military family.
I do. My father was a Marine Corps veteran who always was involved with veterans affairs. Every opportunity he had to wear that uniform, he would, until it was time for his son, who wanted to join the Marine Corps right after high school. I turned 19, and without my parents knowing it, I went and enlisted in the Marine Corps.
You get to Vietnam in '68. You're coming in as a replacement soldier or a replacement Marine.
I was just coming in to join the unit because they were losing a lot of men. We had our M60, and I was assigned to a four-man unit. You know, so we had our gunner, our assistant gunner, and two others, and that's what we were assigned to. October 9th, we were encountering small arms fire, mortars, RPG rockets, and all I could remember is just all hell broke loose. And then an RPG landed, and that's when I got hit. I felt my body just through the air. And when I landed, I was still conscious. And I laid there and I was panicking because I couldn't breathe. But then I was able to reach up, and what was blocking my airway was bone from my jaw and teeth. And I cleared my airway because it's just chaos going on, chaos. I remember regaining consciousness on the helicopter, on the medevac, back to NSA Da Nang Hospital. And then I would lose consciousness and regain consciousness. What I do remember is someone coming over, and all I could remember is seeing a scalpel. So they put in a tracheostomy so I could breathe.
So you lost most of your jaw, your bottom jaw.
Lost 80% of my jaw, 24 teeth, lower lip, 20% of my tongue.
And did they expect you to make it?
No, I was not expected to survive. Before I left Da Nang, I was stable. And that's when they started transitioning me back. I did something in Japan that probably shouldn't have done. I wanted to see what happened to me, so I snuck in to the physician's office and got that mirror. Went back to my bunk and took my bandage off. The reflection I saw in that mirror was not of a human face. It was a monster. There was nothing human about it. After that, I did become very independent and very determined that somehow I was going to make it through this. 77 is when I finally woke up and realized that I was disfigured, I was disabled, and that's when it really came to light. In 1978, PTSD didn't exist. In 1979, for the first time, delayed stress syndrome, before it was known as post-traumatic stress disorder, delayed stress syndrome was finally diagnosed. And that's when I started working for one of the first vet centers in the country in Pittsburgh as a counselor. And for me to just not recognize my Vietnam time, I can't remove that chapter from my life. It has molded my life. Not necessarily, you know, the disability and the wounds, the hospitalizations, but it's made me the person I am.
Very poignant moment we had in Vietnam, and we're going to go back.
Are you?
To Vietnam in 2020, February 2020. Open to anybody. Anybody who wants to go, let me know. It's a magical, beautiful country. The people were wonderful.
That's what I've heard too.
I think we were all stunned by the beauty of the country, the natural beauty, the prosperity of the cities. As you move south, I mean, Saigon and Da Nang are just sparkling, beautiful, extremely kind of modern cities. And then to go into the countryside and see some of these places where our men and women served, it's just, it was an incomparable experience. I brought my 17-year-old daughter on the trip.
Nice.
And she loved it. I mean, it's something that she'll never forget. Being in Vietnam with Vietnam vets, just wonderful. But we're doing also more local trips. We're doing a trip this week to the Columbus, the National Veterans Memorial and Museum in Columbus that just opened last fall. And we're coupling that with a day at the Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson in
Oh,
Dayton.
that's nice.
And so it's an overnight trip, and we're leaving on Thursday. We'll come back Friday night. We're taking 56 people, so it'll
That's
be
a lot.
it'll be a great event. Yeah.
Well, we're out of time for the show. I very much appreciate you sharing everything with us here, Todd. I will ask everyone, if you want to get involved, you hear the events, if you want to go to Vietnam and get some of that exposure, please contact, and Todd, if you'll give again how they can contact you, we'll wrap the show up.
Yes, they could go to vbcpgh.org. They could email me at todd@veteransbreakfastclub.com, or they could call 412-623-9029. That's our phone number for the Veterans Breakfast Club.
Perfect. Thank you again so much,
Thank you, Jack,
Todd.
for having me.